Marcus is sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning, coffee going cold beside him, laptop open. He is not reading the news, he is not checking email, he is staring at his mortgage statement, 14 months into a 30-year amortization on a condo in North York. Principal balance, down about $9,000 from where he started. 9,000, 14 months. He does the math in his head. He already knows the answer. He has done this math before late at night in the way you pick at something that hurts. At this pace, the house will be his, fully his. When he is 68 years old, his father paid off the family home in Mississauga at 54. Same country, same banks, same idea of what owning a home was supposed to mean. Different outcome. And the gap between those two numbers, 54 and 68, is not a gap in discipline, it is not a gap in ambition, it is not a gap in how hard someone worked or how carefully someone saved. It is a gap that was built into the system before Marcus ever walked into a bank branch and signed his name. This is the story of that gap, what created it, who it benefits, and what it actually means to reach the finish line in a country where the finish line has quietly moved an entire generation further down the road. Let's go back to where Marcus's father started. The year is 1987. His name is David. He is 29 years old. He works in procurement for a mid-sized manufacturing company in Brampton. His salary is around $42,000 a year. His wife Sandra works part-time as a dental receptionist. Together, they bring home just under $60,000 annually. Not wealthy, comfortable. They buy a semi-detached in Mississauga. Purchase price $184,000. They put 20% down, $36,000, saved over about 2 years. They carry a mortgage of $148,000 at a variable rate that will float around 10 to 12% over the early years before dropping significantly through the 90s. The monthly payment is high relative to their income in those first years, genuinely tight. But the key ratio, the one that determines whether a mortgage is survivable or suffocating, is price relative to income. Their home costs roughly 3 times their household income. 3 times. That ratio is the foundation of everything that follows. By 2000, with the rate environment dramatically lower and their salaries both risen, the mortgage is manageable. By 2007, David makes a lump sum payment from a bonus. By 2012, they refinance once to consolidate a small renovation loan. And in June of 2016, David clicks Pay Now on the final balance. He is 54 years old, Sandra is 52, their daughter is finishing her undergraduate degree, their son Marcus is 20 years old, they burn no mortgage, there is no ceremony. David just closes the laptop and tells Sandra it is done. They go out for dinner. Not an expensive place, just dinner. But something has shifted. The biggest recurring expense in their financial life has disappeared. Every dollar David earns from that point forward belongs to them first. He will work another 11 years before retiring. Those 11 years of mortgage-free income will fund the retirement accounts, the TFSA contributions, the help they eventually give Marcus when he tries to buy his own place. The paid-off house is not just a roof, it is a machine that generates financial breathing room for over a decade. Now come back to Marcus, 2023. He is 36 years old, same age his father was in 1994, 7 years into his mortgage, balance shrinking steadily. Marcus is not 7 years into a mortgage. Marcus is trying to get into the market for the first time. The condo he eventually buys in North York is listed at $740,000. Not a house, not a semi. A 1-bedroom plus den, 860 square feet on the 14th floor of a building that went up in 2019. He puts down $148,000, almost exactly the size of his father's entire original mortgage. His down payment is his father's mortgage. He carries $592,000 at 5.8% on a 30-year amortization. His monthly payment is $3,400. His gross salary is $91,000. His partner, Jess, earns $78,000. Combined household income, $169,000. They look wealthy on paper. They do not feel it. The price-to-income ratio on Marcus's condo is 4.4 times their combined household income. Better than a detached house in Toronto, which would push that ratio to nearly 7. But still 47% higher than what his father faced. And his father's ratio kept shrinking as wages rose and home prices held relatively flat in the 90s. Marcus's ratio has no such tailwind waiting for him. This is the first thing most people get wrong about the generation gap in Canadian housing. They compare the dollar amounts. They say, well, your father's mortgage was 148,000 and yours is nearly 600,000. Of course it's harder, but the dollar amounts are not the right comparison. The right comparison is the ratio. How many years of your household income does this house cost? And that ratio, not the sticker price, is what tells you how much of your working life you're handing to the bank. For David's generation in most Canadian cities outside Vancouver and Toronto, that ratio was between 2.5 and 4. For Marcus's generation, it ranges from 4.5 in secondary markets to 12 in downtown Toronto for a detached home. That is not a small drift. That is a structural reconfiguration of what homeownership costs in units of human working time. And here's where the story gets uncomfortable, because when Marcus's parents were young, and some of his older coworkers like to say this without thinking it through, people worked hard, lived within their means, and made it happen. The implication is clear. The people who cannot make it happen today must be doing something differently. Spending too much, saving too little, choosing avocados over down payments. Let's run that logic against actual numbers. For Marcus to face the same price-to-income ratio his father did in 1987, a ratio of roughly 3 times household income, the condo he bought for $740,000 would need to cost around $500,000. Or his household income would need to be around $247,000 per year. He and Jess earn $169,000. The gap between what they earn and what the ratio requires is not bridgeable by cutting subscriptions. It is not bridgeable by skipping restaurants. It is not bridgeable by discipline or intention or any personal decision they could make. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's own data shows the average time to save a down payment for a first-time buyer in Canada is now 3.4 years. That number is carried by dual-income households with help from family. Remove the family gifting, which now accounts for nearly 30% of all first-time purchases, and that timeline stretches significantly. In Vancouver, financial planners have documented cases of couples saving for 7 to 10 years before reaching their target. Not because they spent recklessly, because the target kept moving while they were saving. This is not a personal failure story. This is arithmetic. But the personal failure narrative is useful. It is useful because it redirects attention away from the structural question, which is, how did Canadian housing go from being priced at 3 times income to 12 times income in 30 years? And who benefited from that transformation? The answer is not simple. There is no single villain, but there are 3 forces that, working together, reconfigured the market in ways that systematically transferred wealth from people who did not yet own homes to people who already did. The first force is the financialization of residential real estate. Through the 1990s and accelerating in the 2000s, Canadian housing stopped being primarily a place to live and became primarily an asset class. Institutional investors, real estate investment trusts, and eventually short-term rental platforms began competing with individual buyers for the same supply. A condo unit in downtown Toronto in 2005 was likely purchased by someone who intended to live in it. By 2015, a meaningful share of new condo presales were purchased by investors who had no intention of ever sleeping there. Supply that could have housed families became capital parked in concrete. This did not cause the affordability crisis on its own, but it applied constant upward pressure on prices in a market that was already undersupplied. The second force is the divergence between real wage growth and asset price growth. Between 1990 and 2024, real wages in Canada, adjusted for inflation, grew by approximately 30% over that entire period. Over the same period, average home prices in Toronto grew by over 500%. In Vancouver, closer to 600%. In other words, the thing you are paid to do went up by a third. The thing you are trying to buy went up by 5 to 6 times. No amount of personal financial discipline closes a gap that large. The gap is structural. It is built into the rate at which 2 different types of value have appreciated. The third force is the policy response to unaffordability, which has repeatedly prioritized access to debt over reduction in price. When housing became unaffordable, the policy answer was often to extend amortization periods, lower minimum down payment requirements, or create programs that helped buyers borrow more. The December 2024 expansion of 30-year amortizations to all first-time buyers of new construction is the most recent version of this pattern. It lowers the monthly payment, it raises the lifetime cost, it keeps prices supported, It keeps buyers in debt longer. The people who benefit most from this approach are the people who already own homes and do not want to see their asset values decline. The people who pay for it are the people trying to enter a market that the policy was designed to keep expensive. None of this is a conspiracy. It is the accumulated result of incentives. Politicians own homes, older voters own homes. Existing homeowners vote at higher rates than renters. The political economy of Canadian housing has for 3 decades tilted toward protecting asset values over creating affordability. The outcome is exactly what you would expect from that set of incentives. So here's what that means for the timeline. Marcus bought at 36 on a 30-year amortization. On paper, his mortgage ends at 66. That is already 12 years later than his father, but 66 assumes nothing changes. No refinancing, no major renovation, no period of reduced income. No helping a child with a down payment in 20 years, no life. Statistics Canada's survey of financial security tells a different story about what actually happens. In the age band 45 to 54, the peak earning decade of most Canadians' working lives, only 22% are mortgage-free. That means nearly 4 out of every 5 prime-age homeowners are still carrying the debt. The dream number, the age Canadians tell bank surveys they expect to be done, is 58. The actual median, once you account for the resets and refinances and upsizes that real life delivers, is drifting into the early to mid-60s. For people who entered the market at 36 in Toronto or 40 in Ontario broadly, that drift pushes the real finish line to 65 or 68. For people who entered at 46 in Vancouver, which is where the median first-time buyer now sits according to a 2025 affordability study, the mortgage-free moment, if it arrives at all during their working life, lands somewhere close to 76. 76. CPP eligibility is 65. Full OAS is 65. The standard working life in Canada ends, for most people, somewhere between 60 and 67, which means a meaningful share of Canadians will carry mortgage debt into retirement. And here's what that actually means in practice, because this part is almost never discussed directly. The average CPP payment in Canada is currently around $830 a month for someone who contributed at the standard rate. OAS adds roughly $713. Combined, that is $1,543 per month in government retirement income. The average mortgage payment in Canada in 2025 for someone who bought in the last 5 years is well over $2,000 monthly. For anyone who bought in a major market, significantly higher. The arithmetic does not work. You cannot carry a standard Toronto or Vancouver mortgage into retirement on government pension income alone. Which means the people who arrive at retirement with a mortgage have exactly 3 options. Drain registered savings to cover payments, which accelerates the depletion of money meant to last decades. Work longer than they planned, which assumes their health cooperates and their employer still wants them. Or sell the family home, downsize, and use the proceeds to clear the debt and fund a smaller life. The third option is not a failure. In an expensive housing market, it is often the most rational financial move available. But it means the mortgage-free moment, the moment David had in 2016 when he closed the laptop and told Sandra it was done, looks very different for Marcus's generation. It is not a quiet Tuesday morning at the kitchen table. It is a moving day. It is handing the keys to a stranger and accepting a check. It is sitting in a smaller place and knowing the difference between what you built and what you own outright. His father owned the family home, mortgage-free, for 11 years before retirement. Those 11 years changed the shape of everything that followed. Marcus may own a townhouse, in Barrie maybe, or Hamilton, mortgage-free, for 3 years before he stops working. If the math holds, if nothing resets, 2 generations, 1 country, 1 word, homeowner, 2 completely different experiences of what that word delivers. The finish line did not disappear, it just moved. Quietly, without announcement. While one generation was raising families and voting in elections that protected their asset values, the next generation was saving for down payments that kept getting larger. The rules did not change overnight. They shifted slowly, year by year, policy by policy, rate cut by rate cut, amortization extension by amortization extension. By the time the shift was visible, it was already embedded in 30-year timelines and 12 times income price ratios and retirement plans that assume you will sell the house to fund them. Marcus will probably be fine. He and Jess earn good money. They are careful. they understand the math. They will likely reach some version of mortgage freedom before they stop working, even if it is not the version his father reached. But fine is not the same as what his father had. Fine is not 11 years of mortgage-free income compounding into retirement security. Fine is making it work within a system that was not designed with him in mind. His father did not build that system, his father just got there first. The finish line moved, nobody told you, and knowing that, really knowing it in the numbers and the ratios and the 30-year timelines, does not move it back. But it does mean you stop measuring yourself against a race that was run on a different track, with different rules, in a different decade. You are not behind, you are playing a different game. The sooner you see that clearly, the sooner you can decide what winning actually looks like for you.
If this story changed the way you see money, subscribe for more deep story about finance, power, and the system behind it.